Welcome to the Bible Odyssey. Here is a kind of dryness that steals in more quietly than any crisis. A crisis shouts. It has edges, a name, a demand. But this dryness arrives like a slow mist. You wake up one day and notice the warmth that used to fill your chest has grown distant. The prayers that once rose so easily now feel like words falling into an empty room. The sense of God that used to feel as close as your own breath has become something you remember more than something you feel. It didn't leave all at once. It just faded. And yet, your faith isn't gone. It's dry. Dry is not dead. Dry is the bones still holding their shape after the life that once moved through them has been gone for a long, long time. Dry is sun-bleached and weathered, fragile but still standing, still carrying the quiet memory of what it was. The prophet Ezekiel knew this place. Carried far from home, far from the temple where he once served, he found himself sitting by a river in a foreign land. And there the Lord took him in a vision to a valley filled with bones, so many bones, very dry. They were the bones of God's own people, scattered and exposed, whispering the same three things the heart always whispers in the dry season. Our hope is gone. We are cut off. Our bones are dried up. And then came the gentle, devastating question, spoken not in thunder, but with heartbreaking tenderness. Son of man, can these bones live? Ezekiel, honest as ever, answered from the middle of his own helplessness. Sovereign Lord, only you know. Tonight, this is for you. If you are sitting in that valley right now, if your bones feel dry in any of those three ways, this word is for you. The same question that floated over that ancient valley is hovering over yours tonight. Can these bones live? And the answer, whispered with the same tenderness that asked the question, is still the same. Only He knows. And He is asking because He already does. You are not forgotten here. You are simply being held in the dry season. The hand of the Lord was on me, and He brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. Ezekiel 37, 1-2. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Ezekiel 37, 3. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones, and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Ezekiel 37, 4. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Ezekiel 37:10. He said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, Our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live. Ezekiel 37, 11-12, 14. The vision is given to answer the very pain the people have already named. Our bones are dried up. Our hope is gone. We are cut off. 3 phrases. God tells Ezekiel explicitly that these are the words of the people of Israel. This is what they are saying. This is the condition as they themselves name it. and the three phrases describe the same condition from three different angles. Our bones are dried up, the image of the physical self depleted, the energy gone, the vitality that sustained the life of faith no longer present. The dried up bones are the bones of the person who used to have what it took for the spiritual life and who now does not have it and does not know where it went or when it left or how to get it back. Our hope is gone, the forward-looking dimension of the condition, not the past loss, the future loss. The hope that was oriented toward the return, toward the restoration, toward the thing that was going to happen. The hope that made the present bearable because the present was temporary. When the hope goes, the present becomes permanent. The exile is no longer the season before the return. The exile is the life. We are cut off, the relational dimension, separated from the land, the temple, the community, the covenant practices that connected the people to God and to each other. Cut off is the loneliness of the condition, the sense of being outside the thing that was supposed to contain and sustain the self, looking at it from a distance without a clear path back in. These three phrases are the map of the dry bones condition in any era. The dried up energy, the gone hope, the feeling of being cut off. And the vision begins not with the answer to these three things, but with the question, can these bones live? The question does not dismiss the condition. It surveys the valley. God led Ezekiel back and forth among the bones, the full tour of the very dry condition, and then asks from inside the valley in full view of everything that is there, can these bones live? The dry season damages the faith in ways that are hard to name because the dryness is precisely the loss of the language for naming. The first damage is the loss of the prayer. Prayer in the ordinary spiritual life has a naturalness, the reaching toward God that happens without much effort, the conversation that is available without needing to be constructed. The dry season takes this naturalness first. The prayer becomes effortful, then effortful and uncertain. Uncertain whether anything is on the other end of the effort, then effortful and uncertain and guilty. The guilt of the person who knows the prayer is supposed to be natural and finds it is not, who believes the prayer should be sustaining and finds it is not, who wonders what is wrong with them, that the thing that used to come easily now requires a sustained effort to produce something that feels thin. The second damage is the loss of the community. The dry season tends to produce the withdrawal. The person who is in the dry valley does not typically go to the faith community and announce the dryness. They perform the ordinary functions of the faith life, the attendance, the small talk, the singing, while carrying the dryness privately. And the performance of the faith life while the felt condition is dry is one of the most exhausting experiences available. The gap between the performed faith and the felt condition widens. The community that was supposed to be the place of honest carrying becomes the place that requires the management. The third damage is what the very dry condition does to the memory of the living season. The bones that Ezekiel walked among were very dry, not recently dry. They had been in the valley long enough for the dryness to become the settled, permanent feeling condition. And the person in the very dry season begins to wonder whether the living season was as real as they remember. whether the faith that once felt alive was the faith or the emotion that felt like faith, whether what they remember as the presence of God was the presence of God or the need for it dressed in the clothing of the experience. There is also the weight of the watching. Long seasons in the dry valley mean watching others move through difficulties and into resolution, watching others speak of the presence of God as a living reality, watching others receive what seems to be the experience that is no longer available. The watching is not bitterness exactly. It is the quiet ache of the person who once had what is being described and who cannot find the way back. Here is what matters before anything else. The very dry bones are still bones. They have not disappeared. They retain the shape of what they were, and the vision does not begin with a different set of bones, with bones that were less dry, more recently alive, easier to work with. It begins with these bones, very dry, in this valley. And God asks the question about these bones. These bones, can these bones live? Sovereign Lord, you alone know. To hear the valley vision the way Ezekiel's audience heard it, it is necessary to understand what the exile had done to the people's theology. The Babylonian exile was not only a political catastrophe, it was a theological one. The temple in Jerusalem was the dwelling place of God, the place where the divine presence was located, where the sacrifices that sustained the covenant relationship were offered, where the people came 3 times a year to be in the presence of the God who had called them his own. When Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple in 587 BC, he did not only destroy a building, he destroyed the entire theological framework that the people had been living inside. The question that rang through the exile was not primarily about the politics of restoration. It was about the character of God. Had God been defeated? Had God abandoned the covenant? Was God capable of doing what God had promised? The people in Babylon were not only politically homeless, they were theologically homeless. Ezekiel was a priest who had been taken in the first deportation in 597 BC, before the temple was destroyed, before the city fell. He sat by the river Chebar and received some of the most extraordinary prophetic visions in the Hebrew Scriptures. His ministry was to the exiles, the people already in Babylon, and his message was not the comfortable message. He was the prophet who insisted that the disaster was real, that the exile was deserved, that the remaining city would fall. He was not easy to listen to. And then, after the city fell and the temple burned, and the messenger arrived in Babylon to report the destruction, Ezekiel's message changed. He began to prophesy restoration. The Valley of the Dry Bones is the central vision of the restoration oracles, the visions in which Ezekiel sees beyond the judgment to what God is going to do after the judgment is complete. The bones are the house of Israel, the people who have said, "Our bones are dried up, our hope is gone, we are cut off." The vision is given as the answer to the 3-phrase confession of the exiles. And what the vision shows is not a gentle, gradual recovery. It is a resurrection. The bones come together, rattling, connecting, sinew and flesh and skin covering them, the breath entering, a vast army standing where the dry bones were. The image is overwhelming in its scale and its speed and its completeness. The resurrection is not incremental, it is entire. The people who said our hope is gone become a vast army. The divine name in Ezekiel 37 is Adonai Yahweh, rendered in our translation as Sovereign Lord. The Adonai is the title of the Master. The Yahweh is the covenant name. The I am who I am of the burning bush. The name spoken to Moses when Moses asked what name to carry to the people of Israel in Egypt. Sovereign Lord is not simply a title of authority. It is the declaration that the one speaking the valley vision is the same one who made the covenant at Sinai, whose character and whose faithfulness are the ground of the promise being made in the valley. The vision was fulfilled in the return from Babylon under Cyrus in 538 BC, and it has always been understood by both Jewish and Christian interpreters as pointing beyond the historical event to something larger, the final resurrection, the renewal of the creation, the breath that will animate what death has silenced. And it speaks to the person in the dry valley tonight. These bones, this dryness, this valley, can these bones live? The hand of the Lord was on me. This is how the vision begins, not with Ezekiel choosing to go to the valley, not with a gradual approach, but with the hand of the Lord on him and the Spirit of the Lord transporting him and setting him down in the middle of a valley. The middle, not at the edge where the overview is available, not at a vantage point from which the bones can be surveyed safely. In the middle, among them. The vision begins with Ezekiel standing inside the condition he is being asked to address. He is surrounded by the bones. He cannot see past them because he is in the middle of them. He led me back and forth among them. God does not let Ezekiel stand in one place and take in the general picture. He leads him through the valley, back and forth, a comprehensive tour of the condition, the full scope of the dryness, the full weight of the bones, the full extent of what is there. And the text adds the detail that matters. The bones were very dry, very dry. The Hebrew word is meod, exceedingly, greatly, very. Not dry, very dry. The superlative, as dry as bones get. The vision does not understate the condition before the resurrection. It insists on the full dryness, the completeness of the absence, the settled permanence of the death, the absolute impossibility of what is about to happen. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? The question lands in the middle of the very dry valley. Ezekiel has just been led back and forth through the entire scope of the condition. He knows exactly how dry these bones are. He has walked among them, and he gives the most honest answer available. Sovereign Lord, you alone know. This answer is not a theological failure. It is a theological achievement. Ezekiel does not say yes. He cannot manufacture a certainty he does not have, standing in the middle of the valley surrounded by very dry bones. He does not say no. He does not rule out what he cannot rule out, because the Sovereign Lord is the one who asked the question, and the Sovereign Lord is not in the habit of asking questions he cannot answer. He says, You alone know. I am in the valley. I can see the bones. I cannot see what you can see. And I am willing to hold the question where it belongs, with the one who asked it. Then he said to me, "Prophesy to these bones." The command is given to the person who just said, "You alone know," not to someone who has resolved the theological uncertainty, not to someone who can see the answer, to the person who gave the honest, uncertain, completely genuine, "I don't know." God commands Ezekiel to speak to the bones from the honest uncertainty. So Ezekiel prophesied as he was commanded. And there was a noise, a rattling sound. Let that land. In the middle of the very dry valley, surrounded by bones that had been silent since whatever disaster had placed them there, a sound. The bones began to move. They came together, bone to its bone. Tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them. The bodies were there, whole and complete, but there was no breath in them. Then God said to Ezekiel, "Prophesy to the breath. Call the breath from the four winds. Breathe on these slain, that they may live." So Ezekiel prophesied to the breath, and the breath came into them, and they lived, and they stood up on their feet. A vast army. The vision has moved from the very dry bones to the vast army. The movement is total, nothing incremental, nothing partial. The complete reversal of the very dry condition into the standing, living, vast army condition. And then God explains, "These bones are the people of Israel. They say our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone, and we are cut off." This is the vision's purpose, the answer to the three-phrase confession of the exiles. And the answer is, "I will put my spirit in you, and you will live." The dry season is addressed by the breath. The breath is the answer to the bones, and the breath comes in response to the prophesying, the speaking, the obedient saying of what God commands, from the honest uncertainty of the person who stood in the middle of the valley and said, "You alone know." The healing virtue in Ezekiel 37 is the prophesying anyway, and the first thing to say about it is that it begins not with the faith, but with the honest uncertainty. Ezekiel's answer, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know," is not the prelude to the prophesying that has to be gotten past before the real faith can emerge. It is the ground of the prophesying. The prophesying that follows does not replace the honest uncertainty. It is performed from inside it. Ezekiel does not arrive at a confident yes before he opens his mouth. He speaks because he has been commanded to speak, from the position of the person who told the truth about what he could and could not see. This is the form of faith the dry valley requires. The dry valley has taken the confident yes. The person in the very dry condition cannot produce the confident theological certainty that the living season makes available. The dried up energy, the gone hope, the feeling of being cut off, these are not compatible with the confident declaration. The valley empties the person of what the confident declaration requires. And God does not require the confident declaration before he commands the prophesying. He requires the speaking. Prophesy to these bones, from where you are, with what you have, with the honest "you alone know" still fresh in the air. Speak anyway. The dry bones, hear the word of the Lord, say that. The Spirit will put breath in you and you will live, say that. Say it into the very dry valley where nothing is moving and nothing looks like it is about to move, and the "I don't know" is the only honest theological position available. And the rattling begins. The prophesying precedes the rattling. The speaking comes before the sound. The obedient action in the honest uncertainty produces the first sign of what is coming. The person who waits for the certainty before they speak will wait in silence. The person who speaks from the honest uncertainty into the very dry valley is the person who hears the rattling. There is a quality to the prophesying anyway worth sitting with. It is not performance. It is not the manufacturing of a confidence that is not present. Ezekiel did not pretend he knew the answer to the question before he spoke. He said, "You alone know." And then, on the command, he opened his mouth. The obedience was not the erasure of the honest uncertainty. It was the willingness to act from inside it, to do the thing that was asked, from the position of the person who cannot see what the command will produce. This is the faith the dry valley requires. The faith that waits until certainty arrives is not the faith the valley calls for. The valley strips the faith of everything except the willingness to say the thing that is commanded, without the experience to confirm that the saying will produce anything. That willingness is the seed of the vast army. The biblical practical application is the speaking. Tonight, in the dry valley, whatever form the dryness takes, speak. Pray even when the prayer feels thin. Read even when the reading does not produce the feeling it once produced. Return to the practice that the dryness has made feel pointless. Sovereign Lord, you alone know. This is a prayer. This honest, uncertain, completely genuine "you alone know" is the beginning of the prophesying. And the prophesying is the beginning of the breath. The research on hope, spiritual experience, and the healing power of articulation speaks directly to what happens in Ezekiel 37 and adds practical clarity. The first concept is the psychology of hope and agentic action. The hope researcher C.R. Snyder identified two components of hope: the belief that a pathway exists to the desired goal, and the sense of agency, the belief that one has the capacity to pursue that pathway. Hopelessness is the collapse of either component. When the pathway cannot be seen or the agency is depleted, the hope that sustained the movement forward fails. The dry bones condition maps directly onto Snyder's model. Our hope is gone. The pathway is no longer visible. We are cut off. The agency is depleted. The sense of being able to move toward what matters has been severed. Our bones are dried up. The energy that would sustain the agentic action is absent. The research on restoring hope consistently shows that the pathway back is not through the intellectual resolution of the hopelessness, not through convincing the hopeless person that the pathway exists before they can act. The pathway back is through the small agentic action, the one small thing done from inside the hopelessness that produces the first experience of movement. The prophesying is that action. Speak even from the honest uncertainty. The speaking is the first small agentic act, and the act produces the experience, even the small uncertain experience, of the agency that the hopelessness had taken. The practical application, the one small thing. In the dry valley, the prophesying anyway is the one small thing, the prayer that feels thin, the scripture read that does not produce the feeling it once produced, the returning to the practice that the dryness has made feel pointless. The research and the vision agree. Do the one small thing. The rattling begins after the speaking, not before. The second concept is the research on the dark night of the soul and its phases. The spiritual writer Gerald May studied what the Christian mystical tradition calls the dark night of the soul, the season of spiritual aridity that mystics from John of the Cross forward have described as a characteristic stage of mature spiritual development. The contemporary research on this experience, built on qualitative accounts of people who have passed through extended seasons of spiritual dryness, identifies several phases: the onset of the aridity, the confusion and guilt of the person who does not understand why the living season has ended, the long middle of the very dry condition, and the emergence, often gradual and often unannounced, of what the mystics call a deeper union. The very dry bones and the vast army are the beginning and the end of this arc. The research does not promise that the dry season has a fixed length or that the emergence will arrive on any predictable schedule. What it does document is that the dry season is not evidence of spiritual failure or divine abandonment. It is a known, documented, extensively described phase of the spiritual life that has been experienced by the people the tradition regards as its most mature practitioners. John of the Cross wrote the dark night of the soul from inside the dryness. Ezekiel prophesied to the bones from inside the valley. The practical application. Name the phase. The dry season that feels like evidence of something having gone wrong may be the dry season that the tradition has always known, the valley that comes before the vast army. It is the valley, not the ending. And the valley has been inhabited by the people who came before and who, from inside the very dry condition, spoke anyway. The third concept is the psychology of articulation and emotional processing. The researcher James Pennebaker's decades of work on expressive writing and emotional disclosure has produced consistent findings. The act of putting difficult experience into words, articulating the condition, naming it, giving it language, produces measurable psychological and physiological benefits. People who articulate their difficult experiences show lower cortisol levels, improved immune function, reduced anxiety, and greater clarity about what they are experiencing. Our bones are dried up. Our hope is gone. We are cut off. The people of Israel articulated the condition. They said the three phrases. They named the dryness out loud in the hearing of the prophet, with the language that made the condition visible, and the vision was given in response to the articulation. God tells Ezekiel explicitly, "They say these things. This is what I am responding to." The speaking of the condition is the beginning of the response to it. The practical application, name the dryness, in the language it actually has. Our bones are dried up, say which bones. Our hope is gone, say which hope. We are cut off, say from what. The naming is not complaining dressed as faith. The naming is the prophesying. The articulation is the speaking into the valley that produces the rattling. The valley of dry bones is alive in your life right now. There is a woman whose bones dried up so gradually she cannot name when it happened. The faith was alive once. She knows this because she remembers it. The prayer was present in a way that felt natural. The community was the place of honest carrying. The future had the quality of something worth moving toward because the one moving with her was real. She does not know when this changed. There was no single moment, no crisis that announced the beginning of the dryness. It came the way the very dry condition came to the bones in the valley. Gradually, through the accumulation of the ordinary days, until one day she noticed that what used to come naturally now requires an effort she is not sure she has. She still prays. The prayer is thin. She still goes to church. The going is maintained rather than wanted. She still believes, in the theological sense. The propositions are still assented to. The identity is still Christian. The framework is still in place. But the energy that once animated the framework has been in the open air for a long time. She is in the valley, surrounded by very dry bones, and she does not know if this is the ending or a season. God led Ezekiel back and forth among the bones. He surveyed the full scope of the dryness before the question was asked. And the question was asked of someone who had walked the whole valley, who knew exactly how dry the bones were. Can these bones live? She does not know. That is the honest answer. But she is still in the valley. She has not left. The staying is the something. The not leaving the valley is the dry bones still in the valley where the question will be asked. And the question is being asked tonight. Sovereign Lord, you alone know. That is the beginning of the prophesying. There is a man who has said our hope is gone. The hope had a name. The restoration of the marriage, the healing of the child's condition, the resolution of the financial situation that has been the weight of the last 4 years. The hope was oriented toward the thing that was going to happen, the change that was going to come, the season that would be different from this one. And the hope has been present for long enough without the arrival that it has thinned into something that is no longer hope in the way hope is supposed to work. He does not say the hope is gone dramatically. He says it quietly in the way the exiles said it, as the honest description of the condition at the end of a long time of the not happening. Our hope is gone. The expected thing has not come, and the waiting has used up whatever the waiting was sustained by. The vision does not argue with the gone hope. God does not tell Ezekiel, go tell the people their hope is not actually gone, they just need to look harder. The vision begins with the full survey of the very dry condition. The bones are surveyed before they are addressed. The gone hope is received before the resurrection is announced. The articulation of the 3-phrase confession is received as the honest testimony that it is, and the vision is given in response to it. The hope was real. The dryness is real, and the vision speaks to both. Prophecy. From the very dry valley, from the gone hope, speak anyway, and the rattling will come. And there is a person lying awake tonight who has been cut off. The cut off is the relational form of the dry bones condition, the sense of being outside the thing that was supposed to contain and sustain the life of faith, outside the community through the conflict that was not resolved, outside the prayer through the season in which the practice stopped and the restarting has not happened, outside the sense of God's presence through the long accumulation of ordinary days in which nothing has felt like what the presence of God is supposed to feel like. We are cut off. The phrase is exactly right for the condition. Not gone, cut off. The connection existed. The cutting is the event. And the person who has been cut off is not the person who was never connected. They are the person for whom the connection was real enough to be missed. The vision is for the cut off as much as for the dried up. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, says God to the people who said we are cut off. The spirit that reconnects is not the reward for the person who found their way back to the connection on their own. The spirit comes in response to the prophesying, the speaking from the cut-off condition, the saying of the words that God commands, the opening of the mouth in the valley where nothing is moving. Open the mouth in the dry valley. The breath comes after the speaking. The formation of the person who has prophesied in the valley is slow. The rattling does not always begin immediately after the speaking. The vast army is the end of the vision, not the first response to the first word. Between the prophesying and the vast army, there is the rattling and the coming together of bone to bone, and the tendons and the flesh, and the covering of skin, and then the second round of prophesying, the prophesying to the breath, and then the breath entering, and then the standing. The vision is a sequence. The sequence takes time. The first thing that changes is the relationship with the honest uncertainty. Sovereign Lord, you alone know. This becomes the ground of the prayer rather than the failure of the prayer. The person who has been in the very dry valley long enough to have stopped performing the confident faith they do not currently have discovers in Ezekiel's answer the permission for the honest condition. You alone know. The prayer from the honest uncertainty is the prayer that the valley makes possible, and the valley does not disqualify the prayer. The vision was given to the person who said, "You alone know." The command to prophesy was given to the same person. The second thing that changes is the quality of the speaking. The person who has begun the prophesying anyway, who has been speaking from the honest uncertainty, praying the thin prayer, reading the word that does not produce the feeling it once produced, finds across the weeks and months of the speaking that the speaking changes quality. The prayer does not become the confident faith overnight, but the thin prayer becomes the practiced prayer. The practiced prayer becomes more available, and the more available prayer is the prayer that, one day, produces the first sound of the rattling. The rattling is often the first sign that something is happening. It may not feel like the resurrection. It may feel like the unsettled movement of something that was still beginning to move again. The bones came together with a rattling sound, which is a disorienting sound, not a peaceful one. The first signs of the returning life are often uncomfortable. The person in the dry valley who has become accustomed to the silence finds the rattling disorienting before they find it hopeful. The third thing that changes is the memory of the living season. The person who has been in the valley long enough to doubt whether the living season was real who has been wondering whether what they remember as the presence of God was the presence of God or the need for it, finds, as the prophesying continues, that the memory becomes more reliable. The living season was real. The bones remember the life they had. The very dry bones retain the shape of what they were. And the shape, the memory of the living season held in the structure of the bones, is what the breath returns to. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live. The life returns to the shape that the life made. The fourth change is the standing. They stood up on their feet, a vast army. The standing is coming, in the form it takes, in the season it arrives. The person who has been in the valley, who has given the honest "you alone know," who has prophesied from the honest uncertainty, who has spoken into the very dry valley when nothing was moving, this person will stand. And when they stand, the standing will be the standing of the person who knows what the valley cost, who knows the bones were very dry, who knows the prophesying came before the rattling, not after, and who stands with the testimony of the valley as the ground of the standing, rather than in spite of it. Can these bones live? Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Prophecy. And now, let everything grow very still. The valley is real. The bones are real. The dryness that has been present for long enough that it feels permanent. This is real. The vision does not argue with the condition. God led Ezekiel back and forth among the very dry bones before he asked the question. The full survey of the dryness precedes the resurrection. The bones are seen before they are addressed, and the seeing is the beginning, the full, honest, not minimizing receiving of the condition exactly as it is. Let the honest answer be the prayer. Sovereign Lord, you alone know. The prayer does not have to be the confident theological yes to be the prayer that the vision was given for. Ezekiel gave the "you alone know" and received the command to prophesy. The honest uncertainty is not the barrier to the prophesying. It is the position from which the prophesying begins. Let the condition be named, the dried up bones, the gone hope, the feeling of being cut off. The naming is the speaking, and the speaking is the beginning of the breath. Let the prophesying be practiced tonight. Whatever form the speaking takes, the thin prayer, the honest word to the valley, the reading of the scripture into the silence where nothing is moving, this is the prophesying. It does not have to be confident. It does not have to feel alive. It has to be spoken. The rattling comes after the speaking. The bones come together after the prophesying. The breath enters after the second speaking. The sequence is the sequence, and the first step in the sequence is tonight. Let the breath be received. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live. The spirit that animates the very dry bones is the spirit that comes in response to the honest uncertainty and the obedient speaking, not in response to the resolved faith and the confident yes. The breath is available in the valley. The vast army begins in the very dry bones. And the standing, the full, living, vast army standing, is the end of the sequence that begins with the speaking from the honest condition in the dry valley tonight. Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Ezekiel 37:3. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Ezekiel 37:10. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Ezekiel 37:14. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Revelation 21:5.